I just want you adults to know that I labored long and hard about how to talk about baptism, because I know that we have some families who come from other traditions. And so as you're talking to your child about baptism, just know that I had that in my mind. That's why I talked about adults being baptized. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about what we consider to be believer's baptism, which means that you're not baptized actually until a person has come of enough age to know what they're doing. And some of those children I don't know may have actually been sprinkled or baptized as infants. We dedicate infants here. So that's certainly a conversation that you will be having with your children, and some of us will be having later. But I did want you to realize that I'm very aware of the different backgrounds that are represented with those kids there. So amen. So be praying for your pastors. We develop the children's moment week to week. Yeah. Their faces are precious and their questions are precious, and this is what it's about. If we can get the message of God's love to them at this age and let them ask questions now, then this is what we're trying to do. So amen. I had the opportunity back in 1998 to visit the Holy Land. It was in December. As many of you know, my husband's the minister of music at Salem Baptist Church, and we went there for a combination of mission and we were in a choral festival in Jerusalem. We actually got to sing in Manger Square on Christmas Eve in Bethlehem, which is really awesome. We've been singing today, and thank you to Raul and the guys for bringing their guitars today. We're having a guitar service. But all of the songs, if you've noticed, have something to do with water. There is a great tourist spot near the Jordan River that looks like a huge spa with a visitor center attached to it. You can go, and for a fee, of course, you can be baptized in the Jordan River. They provide you with all the gear. They usually tell you, wear something underneath. It was December, remember. It's not so cold as we have today, but it wasn't exactly warm. That old spiritual that says Jordan River, chilly and cold, chills the body and not the soul. It was chilly and cold that day. But there are huge locker rooms where men and women can go, and you get all dressed, and you go down to the bank of the river, and there's little paths, and Reverend Meeks was there in waders. And there were about almost 100 of us on this trip. And I would say he probably baptized at least 50 people in this chilly Jordan River. And when you come up out of it, you can't help but think, wow, somewhere along this particular body of water, John the Baptist baptized Jesus. Of course, when Jesus came up out of the Jordan, he probably didn't have a nice little locker room to go and change into dry clothes. And there probably wasn't a nice gift shop set up as he exited the locker room. But water is so important in the story of baptism because water has a ritual significance not only for Jews and even for Christians, but for many religions around the world. The Jews had a thing with bodily fluids, and they had a thing with being dirty before entering into any temple or synagogue or even offering sacrifice. So you had to go to a ritual pool to cleanse yourself before you would be allowed to enter the temple grounds, before you would be allowed to offer sacrifices. Mary and Joseph bring the baby to the temple to be blessed, and she had to undergo her own ritual purification after giving birth in order to be able to enter the temple. They have excavated remnants around the temple of all these different pools. Some of them were ritual pools, some of them were healing pools. So if you went into certain pools and came back out, you would go down a set of stairs and walk back up. You had to do it multiple times. We know the story of the man who sat by the pool of Bethesda. They believed that an angel would come down and trouble the water. And if you got to the pool at just the right time, then you would be healed. So water has this extreme significance in religious rituals around the world. And I've titled this sermon, Is There Something in the Water? Because we need to think about what baptism really means. When we have babies, in some churches we sprinkle them. In the Catholic Church, they actually christen them with water and sprinkle. That water is considered holy because it's been blessed. Here in our church, we dedicate our babies. We commit to God and to our friends and our church that we're going to make sure that those children are raised with the knowledge of God, that they will at some point be given all the spiritual development and encouragement that we can give to them. And there are a lot of people who are very afraid that somehow if they don't get in that water, they're not really a part of the church. They're not really a believer in Jesus Christ. Somebody asked the question, well, what happens if a baby dies? They haven't been sprinkled, or dedicated, or baptized. I believe God receives that soul. So let's say you come to church and you've made a confession of faith, and something happens to you and you're too ill, let's say, for us to get you in the pool. Is there something wrong if we don't immerse you? What if we just had you sit on a chair, sprinkled you a little bit? Or leaned you back like we would in a shampoo bowl and just maybe poured water on your head? Do you think God is so legalistic about the water itself? I don't think so. Because here's the thing about baptism. The water is a symbol, an outward symbol of an inward change. It makes no good for you to get in the water and come out still the same demon that you were when you went in. It makes no good for you to go into the water unless you have made a choice that by becoming a follower of Jesus Christ, you're going to live life a little differently. Unless you come up out of the water having made the decision that you're going to yield yourself to teaching and development, then maybe you're going to learn a little bit more about this Jesus whom you've come to have faith in. Unless you come up out of the water understanding that what God has called you to is not a life of self-righteousness, but a life of servanthood and humility. We joke about the Pharisees who believed that they were ritually perfect and more important than others because they followed the law to the letter, completely forgetting about the reason that the law was given, which was to reconcile us to God, to allow us to have the same relationship with God that He intended when He created us. So when Jesus says, I came to fulfill the law and not destroy it, when Jesus didn't keep all the little ifs, ands, or buts, Jesus was simply saying what God is looking on is the state of our heart. And He comes to John, his cousin, and what does John say to him? John says, Lord, I'm the one who needs to be baptized with you. Jesus was, of course, we believe, divine without sin, so He didn't need to be baptized. But He set this example that part of being reconciled to God was, in effect, a submission. There is a process of saying, Lord, I believe, and Lord, I yield myself to do things your way. Baptism, then, is a response to our faith. We're no more holy when we come up out of the water on the outside. Because guess what? If you take a shower today, there's nothing magic about that water. Tomorrow, you will still need to, and I very much hope that you will, take a shower. That's just like the sacrifices. At one point in time, every time you did something wrong, got to go and offer this sacrifice for reconciliation with my neighbor. I got to offer this sacrifice for forgiveness because I quarreled with my spouse. This sacrifice because I didn't do the last sacrifice right and I'm not in good standing with God. We don't have to keep going back in the water the way the old folks in the Hebrew days did. We don't have to keep being cleansed. The baptism is a symbol of a cleansing that only God can do. Our spirits are washed. Our hearts are washed. Baptism is an outward symbol of an inner change. There's really nothing special in the water. It's the Spirit of God that rests in us, that empowers us to be different once we've come out. And that's what's really important about baptism. I hope that you think about that time when you were baptized, and if you have children, as you're talking to them about God and they start to ask questions, let's remember that that rite and that ritual really means that they formally enter into a certain kind of fellowship with fellow believers. But the water in and of itself is not what makes the change. It's God's ability to change our hearts.